Introduction, disclaimer, and first impressions. Before we get started, I want to mention that this video will be using an English voiceover. I appreciate your understanding, as while I can understand English very well, speaking it fluently is still challenging since it is not my native language. With that out of the way, I also want to point out that everything you'll see in this video is subject to change. This is a demo version of the game, and many systems, classes, mechanics, balance decisions, and features may be adjusted based on player feedback before the official launch. Now then, let's get started. Embers of the Uncrowned is an upcoming MMORPG developed and published by Nexon. In terms of gameplay, it can best be compared to titles such as Lost Ark, Diablo IV, and Path of Exile. While it follows the core MMORPG formula, it is important to mention that some areas function through instanced hubs or phased hubs. This approach helps manage population density and prevents overcrowding, resulting in a smoother overall experience. As for the story, that will not be the focus of this video. Once the game officially launches and the complete narrative becomes available, we'll take a deeper look at the lore and world building. Before we jump into the guide section and everything I've learned after spending more than 40 hours with the demo so far, I want to cover the game's biggest strengths and weaknesses. Starting with the positives, visually the game meets the modern standards expected from this type of RPG-MMORPG. Performance is generally solid, even though the game appears to rely quite heavily on the GPU, despite not always pushing the highest level of graphical detail. Throughout my testing, the game maintained a stable 120 FPS without major issues. This assumes you're running a reasonably modern gaming PC with updated hardware. Older systems may struggle more, especially during large-scale encounters. When it comes to controls, the game supports both traditional keyboard and mouse gameplay, as well as controller support. Personally, I found the controller experience to be significantly smoother and more comfortable. The only downside is the somewhat awkward implementation of mouse mode while using a controller, which can feel unnecessarily cumbersome. Combat still has room for improvement, but it already feels satisfying enough to keep players engaged. We'll talk more about the classes later, but overall they're in a decent state. Could there be more classes and greater variety? Absolutely. However, since this is currently a demo, only 3 classes are available, and that is very likely to change as development continues. For this beta, the maximum level is 20. Reaching that cap takes roughly 4 to 5 hours depending on your pace. Once you hit level 20, you'll transition into what essentially becomes the demo's endgame experience, which we'll discuss in more detail later in the video. Another important point is that the current classes are gender-locked. Fortunately, the developers have already stated that this restriction is planned to change in the future. Character customization is excellent and offers a surprisingly large amount of variety. The only unfortunate aspect is that the game uses an isometric Diablo-style camera, meaning you rarely get to appreciate all the details of your character unless you're using photo mode or zooming in manually. Finally, the developers have repeatedly stated that they do not want the game to become pay-to-win or pay-to-progress. During the beta, players are already receiving a wide variety of cosmetic rewards simply for participating. It's worth noting, however, that these rewards have already been announced as future purchasable cosmetics after launch, allowing players who missed the beta to obtain them later. Now, let's talk about the negatives. Due to the limited amount of content currently available, the demo's endgame can become repetitive fairly quickly. The classes also lack the level of depth and build complexity that many players expect from long-term ARPG experiences. Leveling may actually be too fast. Many players will likely rush through the main progression path and completely skip side quests, which is unfortunate because some of those side activities become more important than they initially appear. We'll cover that topic later because it deserves its own section. Combat can also become visually overwhelming in certain situations, especially during world boss encounters. Since there is currently no option to disable or reduce the visual effects of other players, the battlefield can quickly become cluttered, making it difficult to track mechanics and enemy attacks. Additionally, loot visibility could use some improvement. In certain situations, item drops and boss rewards blend into the environment due to transparency and visual effects, making them harder to notice than they should be. Performance optimization also has room for improvement. The game appears to rely heavily on GPU performance without maintaining the same level of balance across other hardware components. Because of this, it's reasonable to assume that a mid-range or high-end graphics card will be highly recommended for a smooth experience. This becomes especially important because the game features perfect dodge mechanics, where stable frame rates can directly impact your ability to consistently execute frame-perfect evasions. With all of that covered, let's move on to the game's systems, classes, progression mechanics, and everything you need to know before jumping into Embers of the Uncrowned. Leveling guide and quest progression. Now let's talk about leveling and quest progression. Like most MMORPGs, the first thing you'll need to do is select your region and server. Your choice will primarily affect your ping and the number of players you'll encounter during your journey. That said, the server choice is not as important as it may initially seem. The game uses a shared world system, meaning you'll regularly encounter players from multiple servers within the same hubs, open world activities, and even inside dungeons. Because of this, the overall population feels healthy regardless of which server you choose. Once you've selected your server and completed the tutorial, which introduces both the game's lore and its core mechanics, you'll officially begin your adventure. Before going any further, there's one important tip I highly recommend following. Whenever you encounter an NPC with 3 dots above their head, take the time to speak with them and complete their dialogue or lore interactions. These NPCs provide valuable rewards, including gold and a special currency called costume coins. Costume coins are specifically used to purchase cosmetic items and character outfits. Since each costume piece requires a certain amount of this currency, interacting with these NPCs whenever possible is highly recommended. This system is still subject to change, and these interactions may become even more valuable in future versions of the game. After the tutorial, you'll enter the main leveling experience. Your main story quest, or MSQ, appears in yellow within your quest log and should always be your primary focus. Side quests are marked in blue, while pink quests function as sub-quests connected to the main storyline. Think of them as supporting objectives that expand on the MSQ and often provide additional rewards and context. If you ever find yourself unsure where to go, the game offers a helpful navigation tool. On the right side of the quest tracker, you'll find a small icon displaying 2 footprints. Pressing this button will highlight the route towards your objective. It's important to note that this is not an auto-path system. Your character will not move automatically. Instead, the game simply displays a visual path for you to follow. One thing I strongly recommend is completing every quest you come across, especially during your first playthrough. Not only do quests serve as an extended tutorial that gradually introduces new systems, but they also provide experience, currencies, crafting materials, and unlock additional NPCs and services for your city. Some of these rewards may seem minor early on, but they become much more relevant later in the progression process. As for the leveling experience itself, it is currently very straightforward and linear. As long as you continue progressing through the main story quest while completing side quests along the way, reaching the level cap takes only a few hours. In the current demo version, the maximum level is 20, which most players can achieve relatively quickly. Based on the skill progression menus currently available, it appears that the intended maximum level for the full release may be around level 40. However, this has not been officially confirmed and remains subject to change during development. Overall, the leveling process is simple, accessible, and beginner-friendly. The game does a good job of guiding players through its systems without requiring excessive grinding, allowing most players to reach the demo's endgame content in a relatively short amount of time. And with leveling covered, let's move on to the systems that begin opening up once you progress through the game. Map guide, resource nodes, and world activities now. Let's take a closer look at the world map and the various activities you'll unlock as you progress through the game. As you continue leveling and advancing through the main story quest, additional regions and systems will gradually become available. By pressing M, you'll open the world map, which also serves as the central hub for tracking progression, events, resources, and fast travel. The fast travel system is fairly straightforward and will feel familiar to anyone who has played games like Diablo or Path of Exile. Once a location has been unlocked, you'll be able to teleport directly to it whenever needed, making travel between regions quick and convenient. One of the most important systems tied to the map is the node system. Throughout your journey, pink quests, which are tied directly to the main story quest, will unlock what the game refers to as nodes. Each node is connected to story progression, and once completed, it becomes a permanent gathering point within that region. These gathering points automatically generate resources over time, even while you're busy doing other activities. Currently, the resources are divided into 4 categories. Orwood Herbstone. Each unlocked node produces a specific material every 10 minutes. Players familiar with Black Desert Online will immediately recognize the similarities, as these resources function as a passive gathering network that supports your long-term progression. The materials collected from nodes become extremely important later on because They can be exchanged for upgrade materials, used to improve gear, gems, potions, and various progression systems. Unlocking a node isn't completely free. However, each node requires you to defeat a specific mini-boss tied to that area. The first time you encounter these enemies, they are part of your personal progression and are directly linked to the story. Once defeated, they become permanent open-world mini-bosses that any player can challenge. These mini-bosses are worth revisiting because they drop gear, upgrade materials, and other useful rewards that support character progression. The map also tracks world boss encounters. These events spawn at scheduled intervals, with some appearing every hour and others every 2 hours. You can see upcoming world bosses directly from the world map, and the game provides a global notification 10 minutes before an event begins. If you're looking for some of the best rewards currently available in the demo, world bosses should absolutely be part of your routine. While exploring the world, you'll also encounter several special activities displayed on your minimap. One of these activities involves goblins. If you've played Diablo before, you'll immediately understand the concept. These enemies attempt to escape and must be defeated within a limited amount of time. Successfully killing them rewards various resources, including crafting gems used for skill customization, as well as valuable upgrade materials. Another activity appears as a red hood icon on the minimap. These enemies are known as bounties. Unlike goblins, bounties primarily serve as a source of gold generation. Defeating them drops special items designed specifically to be sold to vendors for gold. This is particularly important because gold is one of the most valuable resources in the game. Currently, there are very few ways to acquire gold outside of selling these bounty items and unwanted equipment. There is no player trading system available in the demo, meaning the economy is entirely centered around resources generated through gameplay rather than player-to-player transactions. Returning to the world map itself, you'll also find a convenient overview of any remaining quests and side quests available within each region. By selecting a quest directly from the map and choosing Navigate, the game will automatically mark the route to your destination, making it easy to track unfinished content. Another feature worth mentioning is the set of blue quests that become available after completing the main story. Quest in a region. These function similarly to daily hunting missions. Most of them require defeating a certain number of enemies before challenging a designated mini-boss. In return, you'll receive additional materials and progression resources, making them a worthwhile activity to complete regularly. Finally, in the lower right corner of the world map, you'll find a system called Region Liberation. Each region has its own liberation progress, which increases naturally as you complete the main story quest and other regional objectives. Think of this as a regional completion achievement system. Completing liberation objectives contributes toward unlocking cosmetic rewards, including costume-related progression. At the moment, only 2 regions can be fully liberated in the demo, but this system will almost certainly expand as more zones are added to the game. In addition to cosmetic rewards, liberated regions continue contributing passive resource generation through their unlocked nodes, making regional progression valuable even after you finish the story content. Overall, the map is much more than a navigation tool. It acts as the central hub for resource generation, world events, boss encounters, progression tracking, and long-term character development. Learning how these systems interact early on will make your progression significantly smoother as you move toward the demo's endgame. Of course, all of these systems are still subject to change, and the map itself will continue expanding as additional content and regions are introduced throughout development and eventually at launch. Housing, mana progression, and citizens. Now that we've covered the world map and its systems, let's move on to what is arguably one of the most important progression systems currently available in the demo. The housing system, also known as your manor. Depending on what games you've played before, you can think of this system as a combination of World of Warcraft's Garrison, Black Desert Online's worker and housing system, or even a central progression hub similar to what many mobile strategy games use. The important thing to understand is that this is much more than player housing. Your manor serves as the main hub for several progression systems, and as you advance through the game, more features, bonuses, buildings, and NPCs become available. Your manor starts at level 1 and automatically increases as you progress through the story and complete quests. At the time of making this video, the current maximum manor level is 13, although this will almost certainly increase as more content is added and the game approaches its full release. Every time your manor levels up, you receive additional bonuses, including manor talent points. These talent points can be invested into passive bonuses that increase your character's overall effectiveness. Depending on your class and playstyle, you can invest in bonuses such as increased base, damage, increased critical rate, additional defensive stats, various utility bonuses. Currently, the system is fairly straightforward due to the limited amount of available content. For example, most caster builds will generally prioritize critical rate, while melee characters will typically benefit more from base damage increases. It's important to note that these bonuses directly affect your character's statistics but do not increase your item level or combat power. We'll discuss those systems in greater detail later, along with the benefits of creating alternate characters. Inside your manor, you'll find several specialized buildings and NPCs, each serving a unique purpose. Let's start with mount management. One of the NPCs acts as a stable master, allowing you to register and select the mount you want to use throughout your journey. Currently, mounts are divided into several rarity categories, including green, purple, orange. However, from my testing, there appears to be little to no meaningful difference between them beyond their appearance. Some mounts claim to be slightly faster than others, but after extensive testing, any difference is either extremely small or practically unnoticeable. Because of this, mount selection currently comes down almost entirely to personal preference and visual appearance. Next, you'll find the gem crafting NPC. This building allows you to craft gems that can be inserted into your skills to provide additional effects and customization. Gems currently exist in multiple rarities, gray, green, blue, orange at the moment. Gem variety is fairly limited, and only a small selection can be crafted. Additionally, these gems cannot be stacked together, meaning you'll need to choose carefully which ones best support your build. You'll also unlock the Alchemist. This building is responsible for upgrading your health potions and consumables. The system is somewhat similar to Path of Exile's flash progression. Instead of constantly replacing weaker potions with stronger drops, you'll continuously upgrade the same potion over time. Through alchemy upgrades, you can improve total charges healing, effectiveness healing per second. Currently, the maximum number of potion charges is 5, and the strongest available healing effect restores roughly 4,000 health per second. Like most systems in the demo, these values are likely to change throughout development. Another building is dedicated to resource management. This area allows you to monitor the resources generated from your unlocked nodes and serves as the central location for managing your passive material income. Finally, you'll gain access to the market building. This is one of the most useful facilities in your manor because it allows you to exchange various currencies for progression items. Through the market, you can currently purchase costumes using costume coins, upgrade materials, using gold, various progression resources. As you continue liberating regions throughout the game, you'll also unlock a system called trading. Trading allows you to exchange resources and gold for additional rewards, including mounts, upgrade materials, alchemy resources. Other progression items, however, the most important part of the entire manor system isn't the buildings themselves, it's the citizens. Throughout your journey, completing side quests unlocks new citizens that can be assigned to different buildings within your manor. This is precisely why I recommended earlier that players should not skip side. Quest as citizens come in multiple rarities, ranging from common gray citizens all the way to much rarer and more powerful variants. Players familiar with Black Desert Online will immediately recognize how this system works. Each citizen provides unique bonuses depending on where they're assigned. For example, assigning a high rarity citizen to your alchemy house may provide benefits such as reduced crafting costs, reduced material requirements, increased building level, improved efficiency. This becomes extremely important because every crafting building has its own progression level. Currently, most buildings can be upgraded to around level 5 through normal progression. However, certain citizens provide additional building levels on top of that. For example, if your alchemy house is level 5 and you assign a citizen that grants +4 building levels, your effective alchemy level becomes 9. This is incredibly valuable because many important unlocks are tied directly to building. A higher level alchemy house can unlock stronger potion upgrades and legendary flasks. A higher level market can provide access to better materials, additional resources, and even legendary mounts. Because of this, choosing the right citizens becomes one of the most important optimization systems currently available in the game. At the moment, there doesn't appear to be a perfect citizen setup or a universally accepted meta. The best strategy is generally to prioritize citizens that reduce material consumption while also providing the largest Building level increase is possible overall. The manor is much more than a housing feature. It functions as the foundation of your account progression, connecting crafting, resource generation, character power, consumables, mounts, and long-term optimization into a single system. If there's one feature new players should pay close attention to from the very beginning, it's this one. Now let's talk about character progression, including gear score, combat power, upgrades, gems, and talents. One thing I really like about Embers of the Uncrowned is that progression is very straightforward. Unlike games such as Diablo 4 or Path of Exile, where itemization can become incredibly complex, the gearing system here is simple, intuitive, and easy for new players to understand. As you complete quests, clear dungeons, kill monsters, and defeat bosses, you'll constantly be acquiring new gear. Equipment currently comes in 3 rarities: green, blue, and orange legendary gear. Every piece of equipment has its own item level or eye level. If you've played World of Warcraft before, you'll immediately understand how this works. Your item level directly contributes to your combat power, also known as CP. At the time of making this video, a fully optimized character in the demo will usually sit somewhere between 3100 and 3200. Combat power. What's important to understand is that item level progression is directly tied to the content you're completing. The higher the level of the enemies and bosses you're fighting, the better the gear they'll drop. For example, even though the current level cap in the demo is level 20, you can fight level 25 bosses. These bosses are capable of dropping orange legendary items with item levels around 160, making them some of the best sources of gear currently available. Because of that, pushing into higher level content becomes one of the main ways of increasing your overall character power. Fortunately, gearing itself isn't complicated. In most cases, a higher item level simply means a stronger item. There aren't dozens of affixes to calculate, massive spreadsheets to study, or complicated interactions that force you to spend hours comparing. Equipment. The one exception to this rule is your weapon. Your weapon plays a much larger role in defining your build than any other piece of gear. Using the Stormbringer as an example, there are currently 2 main weapon paths available. One weapon specializes in wind abilities, increasing their damage while also reducing their cooldowns. The second weapon specializes in lightning abilities, offering increased lightning damage and stronger synergy with lightning-focused builds. These bonuses are directly connected to the talent system, allowing you to specialize further into a particular playstyle. Because of this, your weapon choice is often one of the most important decisions you'll make when building your character. Outside of that, gearing remains very simple and easy to follow. Now let's move on to the upgrade system. One thing many MMO players will be happy to hear is that there is currently no failure system. Your upgrades cannot fail. They cannot downgrade, and you don't lose progress. Every successful upgrade is guaranteed. The challenge isn't RNG. The challenge is gathering the materials required to perform the upgrades. Thankfully, if you've been investing in your manor and assigning the correct citizens to your buildings, you can significantly reduce the material cost of upgrading your equipment. World bosses are currently one of the best sources of upgrade materials, often providing enough resources to keep your progression moving without requiring excessive grinding. At the moment, equipment can be upgraded up to +4. This cap will most likely increase in future versions of the game, but for now, +4 is the maximum. Each upgrade increases your overall stats and makes your character stronger. However, it's important to note that upgrades does increase your eye level instead. They improve the raw power of the item itself, along with the unique bonuses attached to your weapon. As a nice visual touch, fully upgraded weapons gain a red glow effect, making them easy to identify at a glance. Overall, the upgrade system is simple. Gather materials, upgrade gear, gain power, repeat. No frustrating RNG systems. No complicated enhancement mechanics. Just straightforward progression. Now let's talk about gems. If you've played Lost Ark, this system will probably feel very familiar. Gems can be attached directly to your skills and provide various bonuses that help customize your build. Currently, gems can increase critical chance, increase damage, reduce cooldowns, enhance the damage of specific skills, or boost elemental damage. Going back to the Stormbringer example, you can equip gems that specifically increase either wind damage or lightning damage, allowing you to further specialize in your chosen playstyle. At the moment, the variety of gems is still somewhat limited. However, they already provide meaningful customization and help differentiate players who are using the same class. Finally, let's briefly discuss talents. Talents work together with your weapon selection and your gem setup. Rather than completely changing how a class plays, talents are designed to strengthen specific abilities, elemental specializations, and preferred combat styles. Because of this, your build is largely determined by four key factors: your weapon choice, your talent allocation, your gem selection, and your skill loadout. The current demo doesn't offer a huge amount of build variety yet, but the foundation is clearly there. As development continues and more content is added, this system has the potential to become much deeper. With all of that covered, it's finally time to talk about the classes themselves. We'll look at each class individually, discuss the most popular builds currently being played, explain how their abilities work, and most importantly, talk about interrupts, or what many players simply call kicks. Because in Embers of the Uncrowned, learning when to interrupt an enemy can often be the difference between a successful fight and a wipe. Now let's talk about the classes currently available in the demo, the most popular builds being used right now, and a few mechanics that every player should understand before reaching the endgame. At the moment, there are only 3 playable classes. This will likely change in the future, but for now we have the Executioner, the Stormbringer, and the Spectral Blade. Let's start with the Executioner. If you've played other MMORPGs before, think of the Executioner as the game's warrior class. It's a melee fighter with a simple but effective playstyle that focuses on staying in the middle of combat and dealing consistent damage. The build you're currently seeing on screen is the most common and arguably the strongest build available right now. It revolves around Blade Whirlwind. The gameplay loop is very straightforward. You rotate through your shouts, which function as self-buffs that increase health regeneration and rage generation. Once your resources are available, you spam Blade Whirlwind until your rage is depleted, then repeat the process. On screen, you'll be able to see the exact rotation, along with the recommended talents, gems, and passive abilities that support this playstyle. The Executioner is easy to learn and very satisfying to play. However, it does have one major weakness. Because it is a melee class, large encounters can become visually overwhelming. During world boss fights, especially when dozens of players are attacking at the same time, it can sometimes be difficult to see your own character. This makes timing perfect dodges much harder than it should be. Before moving on to the next class, I want to talk about one of the most important mechanics in the game, interrupts. Across all classes, you'll notice that certain abilities have a small purple marker attached to them. These abilities are interrupts, sometimes called kicks, and you should always have at least one of them on your skill bar. Personally, I recommend selecting whichever interrupt has the shortest cooldown, and then supporting it with gems that further reduce that cooldown. The reason is simple. Interrupts are mandatory. Whether you're fighting world bosses, dungeon bosses, or future endgame encounters, many enemies have abilities that absolutely must be interrupted. If these casts go through, they can easily wipe an entire group. Learning when to interrupt is just as important as learning your damage rotation. While we're talking about combat, let's also discuss ultimate skills. To the left of your skill bar, you'll see your ultimate gauge. This meter gradually fills as you use abilities throughout combat. Once it reaches 100%, you can activate your ultimate. In most situations, I recommend using it immediately after a successful interrupt or during a stagger phase. For players familiar with other MMOs, a stagger phase is essentially a damage window, where the boss becomes temporarily stunned and receives increased damage. Using your ultimate during these windows allows you to maximize its value. However, your ultimate does much more than just deal damage. Activating it instantly heals your character and completely refreshes your health potion charges. This creates a very useful synergy where you can spend all of your potion charges during a difficult encounter and then immediately recover them by using your ultimate. There's also another advanced use for it. The ultimate animation places your character into a temporary animation lock, which can sometimes be used as a defensive tool. For example, if a dangerous boss cast is about to hit and nobody manages to interrupt it, activating your ultimate at the correct moment can allow you to avoid the damage entirely by taking advantage of the animation's invulnerability frames. It's a small detail, but one that can absolutely save your life during difficult encounters. Now let's move on to the Stormbringer. The Stormbringer is essentially the game's mage class. Currently, the lightning build you're seeing on screen is considered one of the strongest and highest damage builds available in the entire demo. When played correctly, its damage output is exceptional. The trade-off is that many of its abilities require casting. This means you'll frequently find yourself locked into animations while channeling spells. If you cancel those casts prematurely, the abilities still enter cooldown, resulting in a significant loss of damage. Because of that, positioning and timing are extremely important. You need to understand boss mechanics and know exactly when it's safe to commit to a cast. You'll find the recommended skill rotation, talents, gems, and passives displayed on screen. There's also something important worth mentioning regarding talents. Within your talent tree, you'll find abilities that are categorized as PvP talents. Many players assume these are only useful in player versus player content, but that's not always true. A perfect example is Galvanic Field. While technically part of the PvP talent branch, it remains one of the strongest utility abilities available for PvE because it increases both your own damage and the damage dealt by nearby allies. So don't ignore PvP talents simply because you don't plan on participating in PvP. Some of them provide tremendous value in PvE content as well. Finally, we have the Spectral Blade. This class feels like a hybrid between a rogue and a magic blade archetype. It combines stealth abilities, backstab mechanics, mobility, and magical ranged attacks into a single toolkit. The build you're currently seeing on screen is one of the most effective PvE setups available. Rather than focusing on stealth, it revolves around consistent melee damage and powerful backstab interactions. There is also a stealth-focused magical build available, but at the moment that playstyle appears to be significantly more effective in PvP than in PvE overall, all three classes share a similar design philosophy. They're easy to understand, approachable for new players, and don't require an enormous amount of theory crafting to perform well. Ultimately, your class choice will come down to personal preference. As more content is added and systems such as Bloodlines, Manor Talents, and future class expansions become available, we may eventually see larger differences between classes and playstyles. For now, though, the gap remains relatively small. Generally speaking, caster-focused builds tend to prioritize survivability and critical chance, while melee builds usually stack as much critical chance as possible due to how impactful critical strikes currently are within the game's damage calculations. Before finishing this section, let's briefly talk about companions. Companions function similarly to heroes from Guild Wars 1 or followers from other MMORPGs. Currently, only one companion is available, Elsin. Elsin specializes in ranged combat and provides some additional support while exploring the open world. That being said, companions currently have very little impact on overall progression. Their damage contribution is minimal, they cannot accompany you into dungeons, and they are also unavailable during field boss and world boss encounters. Because of this, companions don't currently play a significant role in your overall damage output or endgame progression. For now, they're more of a supplementary feature than a core gameplay system, although that could certainly change as development continues. And with that, I think we've covered pretty much everything currently available in the demo. Once you reach the endgame, your daily routine will mostly revolve around completing hunts, farming materials, upgrading your manor, participating in world boss events, and running dungeons. It's worth mentioning that dungeons currently have a limited number of daily entries. These entries reset every day, but they are shared across your entire account. This means that if you use all of your dungeon entries on a single character, your alternate characters won't be able to run those dungeons again until the next daily reset. Speaking of alternate characters, or alts, they are actually quite valuable. While they don't currently share gear or upgrade materials, they do contribute to your overall manor progression by allowing you to complete additional quests and unlock more citizens. They also benefit from the same manor talents and account progression systems, making them a worthwhile investment if you plan to play the game long term. Of course, all of this is based on the current version of the demo, and is subject to change as development continues. So after spending more than 40 hours with the game, what do I think about Embers of the Uncrowned? I think it has a lot of potential. At the same time, I also think there is still a lot of work ahead of the developers. Some systems need additional depth. Class progression could become more interesting. Performance optimization could use some improvements. And the endgame loop will need more variety if the game wants to keep players engaged over long periods of time. That being said, it's important to remember that this is still a demo. Many of the systems we've discussed today are unfinished, and there's plenty of time for improvements, adjustments, balancing, and new content before launch. Would I recommend trying Embers of the Uncrowned? Yes, I would, at least in its current state. I think it's worth experiencing for yourself, especially if you're a fan of MMORPGs and ARPG-style combat. However, I would strongly encourage you to approach it with an open mind and avoid comparing it too heavily to other games. This isn't just advice for Embers of the Uncrowned. It's something I recommend whenever you're trying a new game. When we constantly compare a game to previous experiences, we often create expectations that prevent us from appreciating what the game is actually trying to do. Every game deserves the opportunity to stand on its own merits, and I think that's the best way to approach this one as well. Whether Embers of the Uncrowned ultimately succeeds or not will depend on how the developers continue building upon the foundation they've created so far. The foundation is there, the core gameplay loop is enjoyable, and several systems show genuine promise. Now it's simply a matter of expanding those systems and giving players more reasons to continue investing their time once they reach the endgame. If you'd like to learn more about the game, you can find it on Steam and join the official Discord server. The developers are currently hosting various community events that reward cosmetics, mounts, and special titles that will become available when the game officially launches. It's also important to note that these rewards are not intended to be permanently exclusive to demo participants. Based on the information currently available, players who miss the demo period should still be able to obtain these rewards later on, although likely through different methods and at a later date, and that's going to be it for this video. If I missed something important, overlooked a feature, or made a mistake while covering one of the systems, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'm always happy to learn more, answer questions, and discuss the game with the community. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, consider leaving a like and subscribing, as it helps the channel more than you might think and lets me know you'd like to see more content like this in the future. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for spending your time here with me, and most importantly, thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. Take care, enjoy your adventures in Embers of the Uncrowned, and I'll see you in the next one.